Hey folks, welcome to Wilpin's Gaming Den. Today we're covering the tutorial for the game Brew, designed by Steve Torres and Pandasaurus Games. Brew is a game designed for 2 to 4 players, expected to be played in roughly 45 to 90 minutes. So it largely depends on the play count that you're going with as far as how long the game will last. In this game, thematically what's happening is that the seasons basically in this world are all out of whack. And you have different seasons that can coexist at the same time. You will be taking on the role of one of the different characters that the game comes with, and you will be brewing potions, training different animals to bring them over, and trying to ascertain dominance over some of those locations over there. And you will do that by basically placing these different dice out in the different spots where they can give you resources or allow you to do certain actions. The game is basically determined, the winner of the game is basically determined by victory points. So whoever has the most victory points at the end of the game is the winner. Whenever you see a symbol that basically corresponds to this kind of shape, so you can have these on these tokens, but you will also have these on a lot of the different cards out here as well. They basically represent the victory points that you will get over the course of the game. So we'll talk a lot more about that once we get a little bit more into the rules itself. For now, let's start off by looking at how the setup works. And then we'll come and talk about how the rules of the games work, what a turn structure could look like, what are the end game conditions, and how we score at the very end. So starting with the setup, to set the game up, you will take the main village board, which is this one over here, and place it out in the center where everybody can reach it easily. It is a double-sided board, as you can see here. So in the first round, you will basically be putting it this side face up. So this will go over here like so. Next, take the cards that come in the animal deck themselves. Now these cards are divided into 4 different categories based on the seasons, and they all have different seasons, and they will have different colors that represent the different seasons in question. Take these, divide them, separate them out by the different seasons, shuffle each of them randomly. Now put the entire pile face up. So you're not putting out specific cards. The entire deck of those type of animals will go face up over here. So we have 4 of these over here like so. We've got resources laid out over here on the side, so 1 of each type. Let's quickly look at the resources. So there's 3 main kind of resources that the game comes with, or basic rather, I'll call it, that the game comes with. So whenever you have to pay a resource of these type, they can correspond to one of these. But you also have berries in the game, which basically act as a wild. So whenever you have to pay one of those resources, you can always substitute with a berry as well. So this is basically a wild in the game. So you have this over here. There might be certain situations in the moment where you have to collect victory tokens. So that's when we'll basically use these. And these are fire tokens. We'll come to these when we look at a few different actions that interact with this one. So just keep that in mind for now. Next, give each player a reference card, which is pretty easy because it helps you keep track of what you're doing on your turn and whatnot. So each player will take one of these. These are the character boards that the game basically comes with. What you will also do is you can either randomly give one of these out to each one of the different players, or you can basically choose one of these, do it any which way you want. The key thing that you want to keep in mind with these are that these are double-sided. So if you're using this side up, your character does not have any special abilities. Everybody's just basically playing with the core rules of the game itself. But if you're using this side up, your character will have a special ability which you will be able to use over the course of the game. So all the players around the table should decide which side face up they want to use for the purposes of the game, and everybody should have either this side up or this side up on their player boards. It's not, you should not be mixing and matching between these 2 different sides. If it's your first game, then it might be recommended that you can go with this one. But if you are more comfortable with the special variable play bars, start off with this side up. It's your choice on which one you want to go with. Next, the game comes with a whole bunch of different dice in here. So you're going to take the 4 dice that correspond to your player color. So in this case, we've taken these 4 for this particular character. You will take 2 elemental dice for your player as well. So you're going to have 6 dice that you'll be using over the course of the game. Next up, you will take these different potion cards. You will shuffle up the entire deck and put out 4 cards over here like so. And then the last thing you want to do is you will take this deck, which is basically the different location cards that the game basically comes with. You will shuffle these up, but before you do that, Depending on the play count, you might not be using certain set of cards over here. So in this game, we're set up for a 3-player example. I mean, we obviously have player components for 1 player, but we've set it up for 3 players. And the way that you can tell that is the number of cards that you will have face up over here is going to be the number of players plus 1. So we have 4 cards laid out over there. So we're basically playing it for a 3-player game. So if you're doing a 3-player game, you will basically take all the cards that correspond to a 4-player game and take those out. So in this case, this one is 3+, so this is fine. But this one says 4, so this is only going to be used in a 4+ game. So you'll take all the cards for that and you will take it out. If, of course, you're playing a 2-player game, you will also take out the cards that have the 3+ symbol over here. And then the rest of it will basically be used. So once you've taken out the cards that are not needed for your player count, you will shuffle up the deck, put it face down over, and then bring out a number of cards over here equal to the number of players plus 1. So in a 3-player game, we have 4 cards out. In a 2-player game, you would have 3 cards out. And in a 4-player game, you would have 5 cards out. And with that done, the last thing you really need to do is decide who's going to be the starting player, and you can choose this randomly, or you can, somebody can select, use any criteria that you feel like, but whoever the start player will basically have this token in front of them as a reminder. And at the end of each round, this will rotate in a clockwise direction, so different players will get a chance to be the first player at the start of each round. With that said, you're pretty much done with the setup for the game. With that said, we'll basically now look at how a turn structure works. So with setup now done, let's look at what you're basically looking to do over the course of the game itself. And I'm thinking maybe we'll do this by looking at the reference card, so that this way, if you have it in front of you, it will be easy for you to associate what's on in here with the actions that you're doing over the course of the game. So the game is played over 4 rounds. And at the end of the 4 rounds, we basically do the scoring. At the end of each round, this board will flip over to the other side. So at the start of the 2nd round, this is going to be flipped over to the night side. At the start of the 3rd round, this gets flipped back to the day side. Start of the 4th round gets flipped back to the night side. And then you do the scoring at the end of that. The number of cards that you will also have set up over here is also done in a way so that you run out of the different cards that you need at the end of the 4th round as well. So that is also another way to remind yourself of when the end game is actually triggered. Now, on your turn, you're basically going through, in each of the rounds, a bunch of different steps in here. So the first thing that you will do in a round is you will roll all 6 dice. So here we have our 6 dice. We'll take all of these and we'll basically roll these out. Now, whatever face value we get at this particular point is likely going to be the face value that we'll work with when placing out dice to do actions in this round. So we're going to save this over to the side now. Everybody will do this going around the table. Once we start doing our action. So once everybody's done this, the next thing you will do on your turn is you can do between these 3 actions. Now you can do all of the 3 actions, or you can do 1 action. Now one of the actions is mandatory, so that's placing a die. So taking a die from here and putting it out somewhere to do the corresponding action is mandatory, and you must always do that on your turn. But you can also do one of these 2 actions as well, or you can do both of them, which is basically brew 1 potion or drink 1 potion. So you could do as many as 3 actions on your turn: place a die, brewing a potion, drinking a potion, or you can do just placing a die, or you can do placing a die, any one of those 2. You have all of those different options available to you. So before we move on, let's have a look at how these actions now work. So to place a dice, you can take one of these dice and put it out on certain spots, but not every dice goes everywhere. So the first thing we will look at are these locations over here. Now these cards have these locations where you can put out the dice on your turn. And you will see that there are symbols at the bottom right next to them. They will tell you the resources that you will get by putting out a die over here, or the action that you can do by putting out a dice over here. And the symbols in that location basically tells you what type of dice basically goes on in there. So, for example, for all of these locations, the most common kind of dice that you will be putting out on those locations are the forage dice, which are basically these ones that come in your player color. And to determine eligibility of where these can go in, a face-up symbol that you have over here must match the location that you're trying to put it down over there. So, for example, if we were looking at this card and we wanted to put something out over here, it would be this dice. The symbols match, so I can put it over here and then do that corresponding action. Or if I wanted to go over here, I could put down this die with the leaf value and do that corresponding action over there, or in this particular case, take that resource. So that's the requirement for going out to these locations with the forage dice. The forage dice do not go on all the locations over here, but you can, these two spots up at the very top of the board are locations where you can put down any dice at any point in time. So no restrictions as far as those are concerned. So for example, you could go over here and then on a later turn, you could send another dice out over there. Other players can also send out dice out over there. There's no restrictions on the number of dice that can go in or how often you can go in there, action after action. But these three locations that you have down here must have an elemental die that goes on in there with that corresponding symbol. There are three symbols that we get on these dice. So you can either have a water, you can have a wind, or you can have a fire, basically symbol values. And they will correspond to these locations over here. So this one requires a water symbol element die. So you will go over there, do the action, but then you're blocking everybody else from going in there and doing an action on a subsequent turn. Similarly, fire one can go here and then the wind one can go over there. The forage dice can never go on these three spots. These dice, however, can also go to those spots over there, and they will do a special ability when they go on those spots. So we'll come to their special ability in a minute. Now let's look at what you are basically doing when you're going to these different locations. So I'm going to pull one of these out so that we can have a look at this together. So for these locations, or locations like these, you will see that they have a resource symbol printed on it, which corresponds to these resources right over here. So whenever you put a die out over there that matches that symbol, you will basically get one of that resource. So that's if you're going there with the forage die. So in this case, if I was going here with this die over here that matches this, I will basically get one of that resource. I'll pick one up from there, take it in front of me, and that's my action. So that's easy enough. This one gives you that resource, and then this one gives you that resource. So these are pretty easy to understand on its own. The other kind of action that you can get on those cards over there is basically this one, which kind of sort of looks like a tooth, if I can call it that. This is basically train an animal action. So if you have a dice that you're putting on there with that symbol, you get to do this action, and this basically means you can choose any one of the 4 face-up animals from over here and put it next to your player board over here. It will go to the left, and on the left side, this is basically the trained side. So this is where once you've trained animals, they will go over here. You have a max limit of 3 trained animals that you can have face up at any given point in time. If you're ever getting an animal through the train action and you already have 3, you must choose to send one of either the 3 or the animal that you're picking up to the released side. And if it goes to the released side, so let's quickly go through the flow of this action. So let's say if I wanted to train this, there's no requirement to meet. All you have to do is you pick up the animal and you put it on your train side over here like this. So that's easy enough. On a future turn, maybe, let's say for example, I already have 3 of these trained on my side, and maybe I'm supposed to pick this up. So I can either just take this and release it directly to the release side, or I can take this, swap this one out over here, and then this comes to my train side. This is now considered released. The reason why this distinction is important because these animals give you some sort of an ongoing ability, which will be available to you as long as it is on your train side. As soon as it goes to the released side, you no longer have access to this ability. So let's look at a couple of examples of what these do. So this one basically tells you that whenever you claim a forest like this, which is basically a winter forest, I think, you will gain an extra 2 points. All of these forests will either have 2 different seasons on it, so you can see the 2 different colors that go across this, or some of them might have a single season on it, which is something like this one. So in this case, if I was getting this forest, and we'll talk about how you can get the forest cards, you would basically gain 2 points when you're doing that. You're going to pick up 2 points from here, and that's a benefit that you would get. However, if it is on the release side, you don't get that benefit anymore. So that's the important distinction basically going on over there, and how you can train animals and then release them. There's a couple more details about releasing animals. I'll come to those in a second. But let's look at some of the other actions that we can do on the player board over here. So on this day side, this one basically says gain 1 of any ingredient. So you will pick any one of these 3 resources over here, and that's your action if you're going there. This one is train any creature. So it's pretty much the same action that we saw over there, but of course you're going here with any dice. This one basically says remove all element die from all forests. So any element dice that you have out over here on any of the forests will basically get removed from there at that point in time. This one basically says gain 1 berry, so you would gain one of these, which if you remember we said was a wild. And you get to reserve 1 potion. So let's have a look at what a reserve potion action looks like. Reserving a potion, when you're basically doing that, you would draw from the very top of the deck a potion card, put it up over here. This now gives you access to 5 different potion cards. You will choose any one of the 5 and put it face up in front of you over here, something like this. What this basically means is it's not brewing a potion, so you have not brewed this, you don't have access to its ability, but what this basically means is you're reserving it for yourself. Only you can brew this on a future turn. So that's the reserve a potion action. And then you will basically have 4 potions left over here, which will then be the common pile for everybody to work with. So that's the reserving a potion action. You're not brewing it, you're basically just saving it for yourself. The next action over here is you get 1 of each one of these 3. So you would get 1 of these 3, and that's your action right over there. So those are the actions on the day side of this particular board. On the night side, if you were to go over here, so again, this works the same way. Any dice and any number of dice can go to these locations, and then specific element dice go to these locations. This one basically says gain 1 of any ingredient, so gain 1 of any one of these 3. This is reveal and reserve 1 potion. So we had a look at that over here. It's just a lesser version of this, because this gives you a berry and allows you to do that, whereas this just gets you to reserve a potion action. This is scorch all empty spaces on 1 forest. So basically what you would do is, so let's say maybe if this was over here and then we had 2 empty spaces, you could choose this forest and then set fire to the different empty locations. To do that, you'll pick up these 5 tokens and put it out over the empty locations over here, the unused locations. For the rest of the round, for the purposes of gameplay, those locations don't exist anymore. So that's that action over there. Now, why you want to do it, we'll come to that in a minute, but that's the action that you can do if you were to go there. Next up, this basically gives you a berry and allows you to train a creature. So hopefully this makes a little bit more sense now. And this says trade any 1 resource for 1 berry up to 3 times. So you can give up, let's say for example, if we had this, we can give up 1 of these and pick up a berry. Maybe we had 1 of these, we can give up this for another berry, and we can do this up to 3 times basically. So those are the different actions that you can do on this particular board over here. Now, so we have hopefully a good sense of what we can do with the forage dice when we go over on these forest cards or on these locations. Let's come back and have a look at these element dice and what we can do with these ones. So on your turn, you can use these and go to these locations or over on this board over here. If you're coming on this board, this hopefully already makes sense, because you can come over here, do these actions, or you can go over here and just do the actions at the spot. But if you go to that location, it interacts with those locations a little bit differently. So let's maybe bring one of these cards back and we can have a look at a live example. So let's say we have this card in front of us. Let's say if we wanted to go to one of the locations with the water symbol or the water element. So if we wanted to go to this location with the water element, we can. And what this will basically do is it gives us 2 extra resources on the spot that we're going to. So basically what this means is you will pick up 3 of this particular resource. So water sort of like means it makes the land a little bit more fertile and grants you more resources coming out of that particular land. So this water element will give you 2 more of the resource on the spot that you're going to. It does not interact with the train a creature location, so keep that in mind. If you're going over with the wind location, the way that this will, the wind die, sorry, the way that this will work is, so let's say if I already had this die placed over here. Now I can go with the wind die on top of it. What this basically does is it takes over the spot of the dice that I already had there and returns this to my dice pool. So on a future turn, I can take this dice and put it out again for another action. So the wind basically returns the dice from one of those cards over there. And then lastly, you have the flame or the fire or whatever you want to call it. What this basically will do is you might have sort of like, let's say for example, I had my dice over here. My opponent can put this fire dice symbol on top of that. And what this basically does, it covers this off. So there's an area control aspect to these cards, which we'll come to in a minute. But for the purposes of that, my dice effectively no longer exists on this one. Whenever you're determining control of a particular forest card, you only care about the topmost die over there. So in this case, this is a neutral die. So this basically neutralizes my die underneath it. It also gives whoever is placing that die the ability to do that particular action underneath it, almost as if they were placing it there for the first time. So if you're putting it on a resource spot, you get the resource. If you're putting it on a spot with the train a creature action, you get to train a creature at that point as well. So that's basically this one over here. So those are the different actions that you will be doing on your turn. So as it goes by, you'll be placing out the dice and doing the mandatory actions. Now you can also do the optional actions, which we spoke about, which is basically brewing a potion. This one is pretty straightforward. The way that that will work is you will look at the cards in front of the 4 available cards that you have over there. You will pay the resource that's printed on the top left. So this is 2 of this resource. Let's make sure you can see this. This is 2 of this resource and this is 1 of these resources. So you're going to pay them from your general supply and you will take this card into your hand. It's as simple as that. At the end of the game, this will score you the points printed at the top right hand corner, no matter what else happens with these cards afterwards. Or if you had a card reserved in front of you, you can also brew that by paying the cost in a similar way in front of you. So that's brewing a potion action, and again the points at the top right hand corner, you will always score those. And with the creatures, they all are worth 1 point as long as it is face up, so you will score those 1 points for those as well when, after you've done the train a creature action. Now once they're in your hand, they will give you access to 1-off special ability over the rest of the game, and that's basically the other action, which is drink 1 potion. So when you're drinking a potion, you will do the action that this card allows you to do, and you will put it face down and tuck it underneath your player board over here. So you would not be able to use the ability of the card again for the rest of the game, but you will always score the points that you have up over here. So for example, in this one, this basically says scorch any empty forest space. So basically you would look at any forest space you want to scorch, take a fire token, put it over there, and that's that action, and you would tuck it underneath your player board over here like so. So that's basically how you would use or drink a potion, rather, if I could call it that. So we looked at the 3 actions, which is place a die, brew 1 potion, and drink 1 potion. So this will happen going around and around the table until players start running out of their dice, at which point you would not be able to take any actions, and then you're passing. Once everybody's done with their actions, you will then move on to the end of round. The first thing you're doing at the end of round is claiming controlled forest. Then you're using end of round creature powers, and then you're basically checking for endgame. So let's look at how you gain controlled forests. The way that will work is, let's say for example, we have dice out over here. Maybe this dice is over here. So basically all you're looking to do is, you want to ask yourself, who has the most dice of their color on each one of these different cards, and whoever has more than others and also more than any neutral dice out there will basically gain that particular location. So in this case, there's 2 of my dice over here, there's 1 neutral dice over here, so I do control that location. So that's easy enough. I would basically take this card and put it face up in front of myself somewhere over here, and at the end of the game, this will score me 3 points. So that's good. You want to have you want to have control of these cards so that you can get those and score points at the end of the game. Now, what if I had 1 of my dice over here and maybe there was only 1 other element die over there? Do I control that forest? And the answer is no. Because when you're looking for majority for yourself, you're not only looking for majority against which other player may have that dice over there, you're also looking for majority against these neutral ones. Because you might have been the player that put it out there, but it no longer matters because it's a neutral die that's out there now. So you don't control that. Basically, these dice will come off. This will get discarded. So nobody would control that at the end of that round. And of course, if you're competing with other players, it's pretty straightforward. You're basically looking at the number of dice that you have over there. Let's say if this was the orange die from the other player over here. So you now have 1 each. Of course, nobody controls that, and so on and so forth. So hopefully that makes sense as far as the control of the forests are concerned. You will do that for all of the different forests up top over there. And then basically divvy it up. Whoever gets control of the forest takes it in front of them, and whichever ones are not directly controlled will get discarded and they move out. And then it says B, use end of round creature powers. So you might have certain creatures that give you abilities when you're doing the actions. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can hopefully read them and they should make sense intuitively. Some creatures give you ability as you're doing the actions. Other creatures give you ability when you're getting forest cards. some give you abilities at the end of a round. So if you have any creatures that give you benefits at the end of the round, this is when basically you get to trigger that on your turn. And then the last thing you're doing is checking for end game. So if you've run out of all cards over here, that's the end of the game. So that's easy enough. Of course, the other way to confirm that is if you're at the end of the fourth round, which is also, of course, when the game ends. If the game has not ended, so you're not at the end of the fourth round, you'll basically do your setup for the next round, which is you take all the dice back from the forest, you will flip the village board over, so you're going to flip this over to the other side. You'll reveal new forest cards, so let's say these were now divvied up, these are going to go off, maybe I won these two, maybe the other player took this one, and then this one nobody won, so this goes off to the side. We will now draw 4 based on the player count that you were working with, and then a new round will basically begin at this point. And then you will pass this first player marker in a clockwise direction, and then the next player gets to kick everybody else off. So that's basically how a round will work, and it will flow, and you're doing this over 4 rounds, and then once all the 4 rounds are done, you will now score for endgame. The way that endgame works in this one is we had a look at how the different points work. So any forest creatures that you have on the train side, you will have the option to move it to the release side at the end of the game. Anyone that you would not have done already, that is. You now want to match creatures to the different forests that you would collect. So this one, for example, accepts creatures from these 2 different seasons. This one, if we had, is of a specific season. So this corresponds to the left-hand side of this. So if we can match a forest to a creature, we'll take the creature, flip it face over, and that is now matched to this forest. The reason why you want to do this is because not only you will score points for this, but instead of getting just the 1 point for the creature over here, if you can send it to a matching forest, you would gain 3 points for that particular creature. So you want to do this for as many as you can possibly at that particular point in time. But keep in mind, only 1 creature can go to 1 forest. So you cannot have other creatures like this one, for example, is yellow. I also have the yellow season on this card over here, but I could not send a second one over here by flipping it over. So that's not an option. I would need another forest to be able to do that. And any ones that you cannot match, of course, will basically just score the 1 point. Any potions that you have brewed or used, doesn't matter. You will score points that printed on the top right hand corner. Any potions that are reserved, you do not score points for those. So that is definitely not going to happen. Any point tokens that you might have collected over the course of the game also will score you points at that point. So you're looking for these point symbols coming from the forests, the creatures, the potions, and then any tokens that you may have in your hand. Resources are also worth points at the end of the game. So you would basically look at all the different resources that you have at the end of the game, and you would score 1 VP for every 3 leftover ingredient, and that includes these wild resources over here. So you're scoring points for those as well. So that's all the things that will get you points at the end of the game. There's a few additional rules I'll quickly just cover through as far as the rules are concerned. There is one exception to the rule of placing a dice out over here. As we had said, it has to be sort of like a forged die that matches that location and you get the resource. You may sometimes want to put dice out on a particular spot, even if you don't have a matching one, because for area majority purposes and whatnot. You can still do that, and the way that you would do that is by paying the cost at the bottom right hand corner over here. So for this particular card, let's say this needs this particular symbol, which is this one, but maybe I don't have this one, I just have this one. I can still go over there, but instead of getting that resource, I would need to pay the matching resource or a berry, which is a wild. But I would put my dice over there, and that's all I'm doing. I'm not getting any benefit of that particular location over there. So that's another way to do it. But of course, keep in mind, you cannot do that for the train a creature location because there is no resource that corresponds to that one. And that's it. Those are all the rules for Brew. Hopefully you guys give it a go, because I've played this at a few different player counts and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It works quite well at a 2-player count as well. So, it's if you're looking for a 2-player game that has a bit of area majority aspect to it, it's definitely worth having a look at. But otherwise, fantastic artwork. Hopefully the rules were clear enough to help you get the game to the table without necessarily having to go through the rule book. Now, there's a lot of these creature cards. And there's a lot of these potions with the different actions. Now, we've not had a look at those, but hopefully if you were following through with the video and actions and turns make sense to you, you can easily read those and have a sense on how those work out as well. We had a look at one creature card, but let's maybe have a look at a couple of others just so that you guys are clear on it. This is the same. Whenever you're claiming a forest, you would get points. Creature cards like these will give you a new location where you can put out dice to get resources. So that becomes like your own personal dice placement spot. So that's pretty cool. Others, remember when we had a look at creatures that give you end of round effects. So this is an example of that. So this basically says at the end of each round, gather 1 berry per active this kind of creature. So this creature interacts. Now you want those kind of creatures over there which are active. Active meaning on this side, not on that side. And you would gain 1 berry for each of those. So that's an example of end of round benefit that you can pick up from there. And then we had a look at this one for the potion, which was basically Scorching Forests. But you also have other cards like these, for example, which is reroll any number of your unplaced dice. So any dice that you've not placed, reroll them, and then you get new face values that you can then work with. Just read what's on the card. It's pretty easy and pretty self-explanatory. So hopefully you can read those and make sense of what to do with them. But otherwise, with that said, that's the tutorial for Brew. If you have any thoughts, comments, suggestions on the video, please feel free to leave them down below. I'll get to them as soon as I can. In the meanwhile, if you're interested in other unboxing videos and tutorials and reviews like these, I have more of those going out on a regular basis. Do subscribe to the channel and the notification will tell you when and as those go out. I also have an unboxing for this. If you want to check out, I'll have the link for that down below. Just go to that and that gives you a good overview of the different components that came in the game box itself. But with that said, that's the tutorial for Brew. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.